approving Mary Niles as board chair. John,
Yes.
Aaron,
Yes.
Arlene,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes, thank you.
and I don't know if there is another board member on there or not.
No,
Okay.
just visitors.
Mary, I'm gonna turn this over to you. Congratulations.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I'm really, sorry to not be there in person. My road is a special kind of moment. I couldn't do it in the dark. Would never get home. So nice to see everyone virtually. You can hear me okay?
100%.
All right, perfect. So, then next up for our reorganization is our vice chair position. I believe that is currently Emily.
Correct.
I don't see her in the room there, eh? She's not with you all.
No, she's not.
And she's not here virtually either. But I will, take nominations for that vice chair position.
I'll nominate Emily. I mean, can we nominate if she's not here?
Yes.
Yep. Any other nominations for that vice chair position? Okay, so hearing none, I'll do this by roll. Kat,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Aaron, John,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. So next up is our clerk position, which I believe is you, Aaron, correct?
Correct.
And are you interested in staying on as clerk?
Yeah, I don't mind.
Okay, so I will nominate Aaron for clerk. We'll do that by roll. Kat,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. I am an aye. Great. So now we are to our SU board representatives. Lynn, do these are these just, people signing up, or do they require a board vote? I can't remember.
You have to do a board vote. So you could choose to do it one at a time, or if you wanted to put forward all three together, you could vote on the whole gamut of these seats at once.
Okay, that sounds good. So currently, the SU board reps are myself and Kat and Aaron. And I have heard from Aaron and Kat, and they are interested in continuing their service on the SU board, as am I. And just any discussion about, is there anyone else who would like to be considered, or are people comfortable if I make a motion around those three candidates?
Sounds good.
John, you're okay with that as
Sounds great.
well? Okay. So I'll make a motion for Kat, Mary, and Aaron to be our SU board representatives. We'll do that by roll. Kat,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Mary is an aye. Up next is our policy committee. Kat, I know that's you and Lisa, correct?
Yeah, and I think that we had kind of talked about, I don't know if it ever got formalized, but kind of reducing that to just one position, and that Lisa was kind of our main policy, but I was like her backup if she can't make it. Did we decide that that was okay? So I mean, if we could do
Yeah.
that, I'm fine with doing that, but it would be nice to not be like 100% committed, since I have two other subcommittees.
Totally. And Lisa hasn't reached out to me one way or the other. Lynn or Kat, do you know how she feels about continuing on the policy committee?
I haven't spoken directly with her about this, but policy committee has been something that Lisa has really, really appreciated doing for many years, and Courtney just gave me the signal that she has, and she's interested in continuing on.
Lisa,
Perfect,
yeah.
okay. Well, I appreciate that, so maybe we'll have just one person as the formal, and then Kat, you will be the backup?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll make that motion for Lisa Hango to be the primary policy committee member and Kat Barnard to be the backup policy committee member. We'll do that by roll. Kat,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Erin,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. So next up is the negotiations council. Currently that is myself and John, correct?
Yes.
It's you and John
Okay.
for teachers, and then it's you and Aaron for support staff. And this
Okay.
year, we're gonna be negotiating with both, within the next calendar year.
Yeah, okay. Does anyone else have any interest in policy committee, or I'm sorry, in negotiations committee, council?
Are you happy staying on?
Okay, so I'll make a motion then for Mary, Aaron, and John to be on the negotiations council. By roll, Kat,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. Next up, is just around the finance and our motion to approve the warrants electronically, which is no different than we've been doing. Any discussion about that? That seems to be working just fine.
And if you wanna continue with that, you wanted to read a motion to approve warrants electronically with 2 approvals.
Okay, okay.
Which is how we're doing it now.
So I'll make the motion to approve warrants electronically with two approvals. I roll Kat,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Mary is an aye. Any discussion about regular meetings, schedule, and location? So currently, we're doing the first Wednesday of every month at 6:30. We rotate around the schools and we do January, February, March in Enosburg as central office. How is that working for everyone?
I think Emily was the person at 6:30 was what worked for Emily. I don't know that, she hasn't expressed to me that that's changed. I don't know if she has to anyone else.
I feel like she referenced it recently, just in kind of her meetings and her husband being on the select board. I think he still doesn't get home maybe till 5:30 or 6. So I kind of feel like we should keep it 6:30.
That makes sense.
Okay, well, it seems like people are okay to stay the course with the first Wednesday of the month, at 6:30.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll make that motion by roll. Kat,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Erin,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. Next up is, location of posting meeting agendas. Morgan, do you wanna remind everyone where all our sites are that we post those, or Courtney, perhaps, wanna remind folks?
I think Courtney would be an excellent person to do that.
Right now, we post on our website, Bakersfield, Berkshire, Montgomery, Sheldon Town Clerks, and then Bakersfield School, Berkshire School, Montgomery School, and Sheldon School. I also send it to the Brigham Library, in case a Bakersfield Town Clerk is not able to. And I send it via email to all of those people.
Is that
Great.
working for you, Courtney?
Yep,
Yeah.
email is,
Okay.
yep, they all, post pretty easily.
Okay.
And I wonder if, Courtney, do you post on any of the social media sites, like about meetings regularly on the Facebook page?
No, I do not post on Facebook, but I do post our meeting agenda on our website, and our Zoom link is always on the front page
Okay,
right before the meeting.
okay. Great. Lynn, we don't need a motion around that, eh?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So discussion, Lynn, do you or Morgan wanna talk about Robert's Rules of Order? Remind me, if what we need to do around this?
So there, Robert's Rules of Order, and there's also Robert's Rules for small boards, of which you certainly qualify. Some major differences in the small boards, you don't need a second on motions, and the board chair votes in the small board section. Any other major difference that you can think of, Morgan? For years, the boards here have been using the Robert's Rules for small boards, so the question is, do you continue with that model?
I think my preference is to continue with the Robert's Rules for small boards. It's what we've been doing for so long. It seems to work well for this particular board, I think. Any discussion about that, folks? Lynn, do we need to make a motion?
I think you could pass on that one.
Okay.
So,
So on the agenda here, we've got this link to the Code of Ethics for Vermont School Board members, and the conflict of interest policy.
correct, so I just wanted to make sure that you all read that. I think it's really important. This is a good opportunity to have a reminder about your roles and responsibilities as board members. So I'm handing you, the board members who are here, paper copies, and we'll make sure we get these out to the board members who are absent. So just take a moment to read the Code of Ethics to yourself. I mean, there's stuff in there about your role, your capacity, your fiduciary roles, your ethical standards, and the respecting peers and constituents, upholding confidentiality. So just a quick reminder of that. If you could sign it and return, and your copy is linked in your agenda. Any questions about the Code of Ethics?
Lynn, do you want to speak to the next part of the board member conflict of interest policy?
Sure. I just wanted to make sure, is everybody good with the Code of Ethics for us to move on? Okay. So also linked there, this is a good time of the year to just remind people about your role on the board and how important it is to remember to be careful about conflict of interest. So I think that it's really important for people to understand that board members have authority when you're together acting as a board. Board members outside of a board meeting do not have authority, and that is an important distinction to remember. There are just some things in the implementation piece about, remembering outside of meetings how to communicate about your role and how to be really clear so that people don't try to bring you into fuzzy areas. The other piece is if you become aware as a board member that you have a conflict of interest, and these are small communities, some of you have family members who either attend our schools or work in our schools, and if somebody were to come to this board and you have a personal conflict of interest involving someone or something that comes before the board, it's your responsibility to call that out and to recuse yourself from that discussion. So it's just a reminder about that. And then any complaints of conflict of interest, that's kind of outlined here in terms of, if something were to come up, how people would make a complaint about board member conflict of interest. And the other reminder, I would just say, it's not in this policy, but it's a good time to remind that if you're contacted by community members with concerns, just to be careful that you're not speaking on behalf of the board, and that you are remembering to encourage community members to follow the chain of command, so that if the concern is about something at the teacher level, that you're encouraging them to reach out to the teacher. If it's beyond that, that you encourage them to reach out to the principal. If it's beyond that, and they've already reached out to the employee, the principal, then they would reach out to me, and they would not come to the full board until they had done all three of those steps. So just reminding people of that is really important. Any questions on any of that?
All right, thanks, Lynn. So next on the agenda is discussion around official media for publishing meetings.
So you have not selected official media in years past. We're using the Courier and the Messenger to officially warn our big annual meetings and informational meetings and things like that. I think we're in a place now where I think the Messenger is the location that we have locally. So I don't think that you need to appoint anyone unless the board felt a strong urge to say the Messenger will be our official source.
And just so folks know, the other print source that we've used in the past, now that Courier doesn't print, is 7 Days, and that's primarily for going out to bid for things rather than meeting warnings.
So if you're good with it, Mary, or the board, you don't have to appoint anyone?
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be working fine for us. I mean, we have limited options regionally as it is, so I think that's fine. Any other thoughts on that before I move on, folks? All right, so board communications spokesperson.
So that is generally relating to media requests. And in the past, most communication that comes to media gets directed to me as the superintendent, and there are times where I'll ask Mary to engage as the board chair if there's some comment that is related to the board work. So that's the way we have done it in the past. Is there any interest in exploring that? Any sort of difference there?
I think that's worked well. All right, so then we have a couple of policies, the FNESU policy on public comment that we need to review, and the FNESU policy on handling complaints.
I did jump ahead a little bit ago, went to the complaints. We've already done that one. But in terms of the public participation piece, the recognition of visitors, this is policy that the boards revisited during the pandemic, if I remember right, was the last time that this came through for review. I think that you were clear in this policy about who may address the board and some limits around public comment. The board chair has the authority to allot a certain amount of time for people to keep the meeting running, and the chair definitely has the ability to rule out of order, should there be anything that reaches privacy or doesn't comply with a code of conduct for public meetings. The chair, again, has the authority to set time limits and use a speaker list as well. Any questions about that policy? The purpose of that policy is really, these are board meetings open to the public, so to make sure that our public has an opportunity to come and participate and to be heard, and have some order around that so the board can do the important business of the board at the meeting as well. And then the next policy is the handling complaints, which I jumped ahead and already reviewed that with you. Mary, do you want me to jump to the board development piece?
Sure, yep, that'd be great, Lynn, thank you.
This has been a bit challenging to find time for board development. It's something that we have, we've been able to do a couple of retreats this year, but that's something that is really important, is to continue learning about your role on the board and to continue to grow in that work. The professional development opportunities also exist through the Vermont School Boards Association. Each fall, there's a Vermont School Board Association, Vermont Superintendent Association conference, usually in October. If people are interested in that, there is money that's budgeted in the school budget for you to go and participate in that professional development. There's also a spring conference that is more centered on board chair superintendent training. For those of you who don't know, each year there is an obligation for Mary and I to do at least a minimum of 8 hours of professional learning together, and that's written in statute, so Mary and I need to participate in those trainings each year. But you are also able to attend, especially that fall conference. Sometimes it's quite a useful conference, and it's good to hear about what other people are doing in different parts of the state. The other piece that I would say is that the VSBA has upped their game, and they have offered some really strong professional learning opportunities through webinars, and they have some Zoom meetings that they've offered with topics that are of interest for our current, things around budget or things around certain things that are, elevated in the legislature at any given time. So I think it's important for you to keep your eye on the VSBA resources as they come your way and try to participate when you can. I think that that we don't have any new board members on this side of the district, but that's something that I'm continuing to try to get better at, is finding ways to onboard new board members so that they understand their role, because I do think sometimes people come on and they think that it's going to be a certain way, and then when they come onto the board, they realize what the structure is really like. So we'll continue to work on improving that onboarding piece. And that's all Mary.
Great, thanks, Lynn. Lynn, do you want to speak to this advocacy for current legislative issues?
Sure, I'm so sorry I missed that piece. So again, the VSBA is a really helpful resource when we do get into the legislative session. You'll get every few weeks a legislative update, and that's really a joint document from the Vermont superintendents, the Vermont principals, and Vermont School Boards Association, and that just keeps you updated on what is kind of in the queue in the Vermont legislative session, what's been passed, and what is kind of fallen off the list for the legislative work session. So I think that's really helpful, because for those of you who follow that, you see things that are really important to us in terms of legislative consideration, and then there are other things. Sometimes it's important to us in a good way, and sometimes it's important to us in a not as good way. So it's important for us to just keep our eyes on what's happening in Montpelier. So I think that I certainly work to keep the board chairs abreast if something's moving faster than our monthly board meetings, and I do try to send things out to you all if there's something that's really timely to know, so I think, are there any questions about that? None of that is new, that's how we've been doing business for a while.
Great, thanks so much, Lynn. Okay, so we are through with all the reorganization components. Moving on to the consent agenda. We have 2 prior minutes that need approval from the February 7th meeting, as well as the February 19th special meeting. There are no policies tonight, so I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda. By roll, Kat,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Erin,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. Lynn, any reason to reprioritize the flow of the meeting tonight?
No, I think that it is in the right order.
Okay, perfect. So that brings us to our visitors and public comment. It looks like I can see maybe two visitors in the central office, and then there are 2 people online. So this, I need to know who is interested in public comments.
I am.
Jared, you're interested in public comment?
Yes, please.
Okay, and the other gentleman in the room, I can't,
Dan O'Rourke, no, I'm not interested. I'm just here to listen and just.
just watching and listening? Okay, great. It looks like Ally Brown has a hand up in virtual world. So I'm assuming, Ally, that means you're interested in speaking for public comment?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, well, why don't we start with Jared?
Good evening. The Vermont Agency of Education recently released the 2023 statewide assessment results of English Language Arts, ELA, and Mathematics for students who are considered historically marginalized, which includes students in poverty. The ELA scores that are considered proficient above include grade 3 at 31%, grade 6 at 38%, and grade 9 at 26%. That means that 62% and above are not proficient in ELA. In mathematics, the scores that are proficient above include grade 3 at 22%, grade 6 at 34%, and grade 9 at 19%. That means that nearly 7 to 8 students out of 10 are not proficient in math. Now, it was recently explained that these test results do not show the complete picture of where a child is at, and that testing standards change and have changed over time. I concur. However, these scores clearly show us that students are not meeting the standards that are in place. The important thing that these scores also measure is the success or lack thereof of our schools. And they are one of the few guides that our community can use to hold schools accountable for their performance. And spending more money will not fix these problems. We may also agree to disagree on what material is or is not being taught to children, or the dangers of certain ideologies that children are being exposed to, and whether these ideologies are contributing to or even creating some of the mental health and anxiety issues that children are facing. However, it is important to hear other people's opinions, and many parents are not happy with the direction of our schools. In November, the results of a Vermont statewide bipartisan survey of adults 18 years of age and older was released. The survey found that 57% of respondents had a negative opinion on the quality of education being provided by Vermont's public schools. That negative number jumped to 71% of respondents with children in the household. So my question is, when are the 71% of Vermonters who have children in the household and who have a negative opinion on the quality of education being provided going to be listened to?
Thank you. Ally?
Hi. Let me see if I get my video on. Sorry. I wasn't able to make it in person there today, but I'm mostly here just to listen in. I don't know if you remember me. I presented at the January 3rd board meeting after the budget didn't pass yesterday. I'm just here to listen in and just reiterate my position and the addition of the 0.2 FTE to my position at Bakersfield in the music program, and just how that position increase is really only 0.5% of the 17% that we were hoping to have. And I remember the budget conversation very clearly. It was really great and really robust, and I'm equally as bummed as you guys are that it didn't pass first go around. But I'm hopeful, and I just wanted to listen in today, and thank you for the work that you're doing. Thanks.
Thanks, Ally. Appreciate it. Okay, anyone else for public comment?
Others online?
Yes, she has.
There was another iPad or something.
Well, that's Terry, so.
I do see Terry's iPad, and then I see that Emily has just joined us.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry about that, guys.
No problem, Emily. You are still the vice chair of the board.
Okay, thank you. I'm assuming you're the chair, Mary.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you. Okay.
This is Chair Gates. I'm anxious to see what we're doing go forward. I see the budget pass. So just wondering what the ending would be.
You're a little bit
I'm so
glitchy,
sorry.
Terry.
On my end, I could not really understand what Terry was saying. It was very broken up.
Is that not Terry Sue?
No, it's not.
Oh, I thought it was Terry Smith.
I assumed it was.
I kind of think what she's trying to say is she's here to listen to see what the budget conversation is gonna be. That's what I,
Okay. Correct. All right.
okay, there we go.
Why didn't come to the meeting?
You're in the right place, Terry.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Okay, so moving on then, we are going to have Gavin with the Berkshire School Spotlight.
Perfect. Is it possible to pull up my PowerPoint, Courtney? Thank you. Is it okay if I stand?
Sure.
So for today's spotlight, once again, just to introduce myself, I'm Gavin Roddy, the principal at Berkshire Elementary School. For today's spotlight, I did want to talk about the structure that Berkshire is in addition to many other schools in the SU. However, Berkshire specifically, how we have structured to regularly improve upon our core functions in serving our students. Next slide, please. So the purpose is to review the concept of distributed leadership, which is what our school improvement or system improvement teams or SIT teams focus on, identify what our current SIT team structure is at Berkshire Elementary School, review current projects and status for each of the teams, and identify next steps for each of the teams. So to go into the why, top-down leadership has been found over time to begin to fall short. And top-down leadership would be what we think about when we typically are thinking of someone who is in charge of an organization and essentially is relegating, or basically that leader is serving sort of as the sole expert, making decisions and passing them down to people who would be subordinates to that person. So traditionally this would have been an example of, say, a problem comes to me involving school discipline. I think about it, I say, you know what? From now on, we are going to suspend every student who misses 3 days or more and has an unexcused absence. And then I send out an email telling teachers, this is our new policy. I send out an email to families saying, this is our new policy. I then begin to enforce it, and probably I get a phone call from Lynn, probably later that day, saying, Gavin, have you lost your mind? But those kinds of silly decisions, if you go back and look at different organizations, and big famous blunders in organizational leadership, oftentimes you'll find that those decisions that I just told you, which is, to be quite honest, a very ridiculous example, you'll find that a lot of times the common element was, it was top-down leadership, where it basically, the leader was basically acting as the sole expert on the topic, even if they themselves are not, made a solution in isolation without necessarily seeking input, and then typically as a result, has very little buy-in from the stakeholders. That would include, in a school setting, the teachers, paraprofessionals, support staff, custodial staff, kitchen staff, students, parents, families, any number of people who have a vested interest in education. And as you can see with education, there are many, many, many stakeholders, and oftentimes these stakeholders are going to have different viewpoints. So, Meredith Summers from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology wrote, increasingly that agility, and what she was discussing was leadership, responding to immediate needs, requires a shift from reliance on command and control leadership to distributed leadership, which emphasizes giving people autonomy to innovate and using non-coercive means to align them around a common goal. MIT Sloan professor Deborah Ancona defines distributed leadership as collaborative, autonomous practices managed by a network of formal and informal leaders across an organization. Furthermore, she quotes Kate Isaac of MIT saying, the leader's job isn't to be the smartest people in the room who have all the answers, thank goodness, pressure off me, but rather to architect the game board where as many people as possible have permission to contribute the best of their expertise, their knowledge, their skills, and their ideas. And so essentially what that comes down to is this notion of you're not going to be, especially in a complex organization such as education, you're not going to be the smartest person in the room in every single subject. Rather, leaders have to begin to find ways to empower others who are closer related to some of those issues, give them autonomy, give them power to help inform and also construct solutions. And so that's what our SIT team is the ideal of our SIT team ideally is doing. So then, the what? At the end of the 2022-2023 school year, the 5 main levers for effective positive change at Berkshire were isolated as campus culture, our MTSS or EST process, which I will explain in just a moment, PLCs, SEL, and middle school. Educators love abbreviations. So each team is led by a member of the Berkshire Leadership Committee based on their expertise, vested interest in those specific SIT team charges, and once again also to help create solutions that are coming from the ground up as opposed to the top down. So for the campus culture SIT team, the charge is cultivating a positive school culture and climate within the school community, cultivating a culture of transparency, trust, and communication. And so some of the work that's been done this past year has included campus celebrations, including staff celebrations, and it can be things such as simple as our chili cook-off, campus bake-off, staff baby picture competition, as well as in helping to influence our whole campus meetings, including the recent implementation of student awards recognitions at our campus as well. Now, in terms of next steps, there are still some next steps that our team is working towards, each of them. For this group, soliciting input from staff regarding ways to celebrate them and ways to celebrate our students, and increasing avenues for family and community engagement as well. Next slide. MTSS EST SIT team. So just to let those know who may not be familiar with those terms, MTSS is multi-tiered system of supports, and EST is educational support team. And essentially what this process is it's a process of our response to intervention, where we're tracking student data, we're identifying students who might be struggling, and planning interventions to help close any kind of achievement gaps that they might receive. It also serves as a pre-referral to special education services as well, making sure that we've exhausted every intervention possible before referring a student to special education, which of course would involve a considerable amount of accommodations and modifications to their instruction as well. And so the charge, of course, was exploring effective MTSS systems, planning for and supporting the successful implementation of the Berkshire MTSS system, building an effective educational support team, implementing EduClimber into the MTSS EST process, EduClimber being an online platform for basically inputting and tracking student data and learning as well. So the work has involved, up to this point, has involved establishing an MTSS continuum of care, meaning fleshing out how Berkshire is responding to those students who might be struggling during first or general instruction. Implementing weekly intervention meetings, determining level 3 intervention. That would be the step right before students end up on a specific plan to support their educational needs. And essentially it's a way for teachers to share how students are doing, track the data, and then planning intervention accordingly with our reading and math interventionists. We have established an EST process as well. Once again, those are for the students who might be receiving interventions but are still struggling. And so we need to do something a little bit more to explore what the cause might be of their struggle and how to help close that achievement gap. And then we have utilized EduClimber, incorporating it into the full process. So the next steps for this team has been incorporating behavior supports into the MTSS process. Right now, we've really honed in on our educational or academic supports. However, we still want to find some ways to make the supports for students who might be struggling behaviorally to help support them and close the behavior gaps. Streamlining the MTSS EST referral process, and increasing the use of data-driven decision-making. Once again, just finding ways to streamline how we can continue to get regular student data and respond accordingly. So then, next slide. PLC SIT team. So PLC stands for Professional Learning Community, and essentially a professional learning community is the idea of bringing like teachers, whether they're teaching similar content or similar grade bands, together to once again review student achievement and help that inform their instruction and plan their instruction accordingly. So engaging in ongoing the charge has been engaging in ongoing professional learning through Solution Tree to continue to build knowledge, improve our system, and improve outcomes for students. Reestablishing the purpose, practice, norms, and structure of a successful professional learning community. Cultivating a positive culture focused on data-driven decisions, evidence-based instructional practices, and improved outcomes for all students, with an emphasis on celebrating growth and learning from and with one another, and building a strong belief in and commitment to the collective efficacy of the teachers and the staff. And so the work up until now has included implementing PLC schedules, establishing them with clear team agendas, which I discussed a little bit at the last school spotlight as well. And then we've also our PLC groups have increased the use of data in setting goals and measuring student progress. So for next steps, we're working towards developing clearer agendas aimed at developing goals and reviewing them, streamlining and formalizing ways to collect data more frequently to inform instruction, and finding ways to keep momentum with meetings going. One of the things that we've struggled with a bit with our PLCs is just because we have them built into our Monday and Tuesday schedule, sometimes you're going to have those things such as breaks. Sometimes you're going to have those unexpected things that have to sort of take priority over the agenda. And sometimes that can really sort of stimulate the momentum that a group might be having if they're meeting weekly or bi-weekly, if they miss a meeting or two, or if it gets thrown off enough. And so just finding ways to continue to keep that momentum going and finding other avenues for the teachers to continue to work and collaborate. Next slide. So our SEL SIT team, that stands for Social Emotional Learning. The charge has been ensuring that there is consistent universal SEL instruction happening in all classrooms, planning for the necessary collaboration between school counselor, classroom teachers, and SEL interventionists, using SABRS, which is a assessment that helps measure social emotional learning, or screening data at both the classroom level for the whole group instruction and at the individual student level for targeted support and intervention for those students with an elevated risk. The work up until now has included the establishment of SEL intervention meetings happening regularly, continuation of flock time and development of flock time manual. What that is at Berkshire is a time when we can bring together students from different grade bands during school or homeroom advisory time to work together and engage in social emotional learning together. The establishment of SEL walkthroughs, which will be happening actually this week, where the SU level SEL coordinator will be meeting with our school level SEL coordinator, as well as one of our teachers who's part of the SU district SEL committee, to perform walkthroughs, just to once again get a temperature check of social emotional learning in the classrooms. And then the implementation of second step SEL curriculum by classroom teachers. Berkshire has shifted so that our classroom teachers or core subject teachers are actually delivering the first instruction, of our SEL curriculum, with our guidance classes helping to reinforce and build upon that learning. Next steps includes increasing the use of SABRES data to inform instruction and behavioral interventions, and streamlining the work of our behavior support team and restorative practice teams to continue to inform the SEL team. And then finally, our middle school SIT team. The charge has been creating environments both in and out of the classroom centered on connections and relationships where students feel a deep sense of belonging, care, respect, loved, with a foundation centered on trauma-informed practices, working with the behavior support team or others as needed to develop common middle school routines and expectations that are research-based and developmentally appropriate, and designing engaging, relevant, and accessible learning experiences that are at the universal level for all students. So the work with this team has included developing a campus community block, implementing our personal learning plans for students tracking own progress towards educational goals, reintroduction of Fun Friday as an incentive for work completion, and then identification of common expectations and SEL strategies. The next steps for this will be developing a multi-year plan for creating a long-term vision, continuing to develop the use of personal learning plans, and then increasing opportunities for service learning as well. And so this is my conclusion. Here's the thing is, all of this is just laying the foundation. There's still a lot for us to move forward to and to build on. And so this is the skeleton of the key processes and procedures, but the work is also going to be ongoing. And we're going to continue to review current progress, continue to tighten and streamline procedures where necessary, and ensure continual collection of data to inform our next steps. And it's going to be just like a PLC or professional learning community does. We're going to identify areas of growth, we're going to collect data, and then we're going to respond accordingly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gavin. I think it's really encouraging for me to hear where you are now, because I know when this started at the very beginning of the year, there was a steep curve for some of these teams, and every one of the teams that your school has decided to focus on, those are big teams that have years worth of work to do. So I think maintaining your focus and continuing to look at it as just ongoing growth is really important.
Oh, it'll drive me crazy otherwise. I wish everything could be perfect right now, but
And,
it's just...
we've had that conversation, it takes some time.
And I just want to comment, I like seeing the post on Facebook about the teachers, I think it's just Teacher of the Month, but they have like their wrestling like belt, which is really just like, they seem to like it too, they look really happy in the photos, so.
I always tell the teachers they have to wear that for the entire month.
Thank you, Gavin.
Thanks, Gavin, it's really interesting. All right, so that brings us to Morgan to talk about things.
Yeah, and so the only thing that I'll be bringing to you tonight is the discussion of the budget vote and where we're headed from there. In terms of FY24, we still haven't seen a draft audit yet. I'm told that they're coming soon. So I don't know if you want to go through other stuff or just jump right into that slideshow that we'll tag team.
So it's been a large day. Morgan and I have spent much of the day talking about, what's next, reflecting on, how things went yesterday at town meeting day and pulling this information together for the board to consider. So here are your results from last night's vote. You had 548 noes and you had 499 yeses. So your budget was defeated by 49 votes.
And this is the same information, it just shows the voting history for NMV as a unified district. So obviously you can see it was successful. The first 5 forays was not this time, and an abnormally high turnout, which we also saw in 2021, which was also the last time we had a presidential primary the same day as the school vote.
So I think that one of the things to just tune into is, now's the time for us to reflect on, who came out and who, used to choose their right to express their thinking about our budget. So that's by numbers. You can see how many people voted in each of the 4 communities. So in a vote like this, I think it's important for us to do a little work to determine, you know, who voted and who didn't vote, so we can be thinking about, determining what's our next communication plan. So if we can look at this, so as an example, I chose one of these towns to look at earlier today, and we've requested all of the voter checklists so we can see who voted and who didn't vote. Obviously, we have no idea, and we don't want information about this, but about how they voted. It's just whether they voted or whether they didn't vote. So just took one town and went through knowing that, 49 was what we lost by. In one of our smaller communities, we went through and I just was looking for one demographic group as employees who work in FNESU. And we're able to identify 40 employees in that one community who had not voted. It's not to call people out or, say anything negative about that, but it informs us when we're thinking about where do we go from here. That's a subset of the population that we need to get more information to, and we need to think through that. So some of the work that we're going to need to do in the next several weeks is to think about, are there other populations of our community that didn't show up to vote or maybe could use some additional information? So I think it's important for us to tune into that. So, I know in some communities, you might be able to identify, there's a knitting group and not a lot of those people came out, or there seemed to be some confusion, or there's, a Lions Club or something like that. So we'll use that information. We've done this in the past for other reasons. I remember when I was a principal, we had this strategy both for a defeated budget and when we were working on a building project vote, so to just take a look at it that way. So it's really just about informing the communication plan.
Well, can I ask a question? Do we know how many registered voters we have in each of those towns?
Is that one here?
We can get it, it might be on there.
I saw on one of the links, I think from the SBA today that they sent us, just on the state level, but by town, how many registered voters.
Yeah, it's publicly available information, I don't know if we have it at our fingertips.
Can I ask a question? How are the voters?
Can you hold on just a second, Jared? Mary, Jared is asking if he can take a question. Are you interested in doing questions at this point?
I would prefer to get through the discussion of the budget that you and Morgan are doing, and then I'd be fine in having a question or a clarifying question.
So on the next slide, Courtney, I think one of the things that'll be important for you to have a conversation about as members of the board and even you as school leaders is to think about what's the message our voters were sending at the polls. So, I certainly have had some conversations in the days that led up to the vote, and I've had a lot of conversations today about, there were some things that were really confusing. I mean, in a good year, Vermont's education funding formula is incredibly complex and challenging to understand. This year, I described our budget cycle to someone earlier today as it felt like a year where we were nailing Jello to the wall, where things were constantly in flux and changing, and were as complicated as I've ever seen anything be related to this. So I think we need to think about, the clarity and trying to make things as simple as possible. Certainly, other factors that I heard were centered around tax rates and not necessarily understanding the distinction between the education spending and what our tax rate was before the CLA was applied, and then even understanding what is the CLA and how does that get determined. So it's, from my perspective, there was also some misinformation that it'll be important for us to identify so that we can think about that in our communication plan moving forward. So were there other things that people heard from people who voted? Or didn't?
I want to just chime on that. I think that there's confusion, or not even confusion, but people taking what was in the report and what was in the mailer and not realizing that at the final hour, only a week before, we had gotten that updated one where, every town's rate was cut by half or even a third. I think Sheldon's went from like 14 cents to 4 cents, in the change of because of the CLAs. So I just think that like our hands are so tied with the timing of that, like how do you let people know that? And I mean, hopefully moving forward in our next round of communications, I would recommend, you know, showing like in black and white, this is what we told you, you know, in January in the town report or whatever, this is where we are now, you know? Cause I think that was lost on the majority of people.
I think
And even then, it was still obviously like a hike, so.
Morgan already has a visual like that we've used internally, just like, you know, when we were building the budget, this was the information we had, this is how the yield changed, and then this is the information we had. Then then everybody went to cap and what that did to us, and then H850, and they took the cap away, that's how our yield changed again. So I don't think you're wrong, like showing that history of how this has been a complete up and down pendulum would be helpful. I've got that recorded. Anything else?
Lisa is writing in the chat right now.
Okay.
I also think the understanding of Act 127 and how it plays out in our area is very different than other areas, and then the media focused a lot on how it's impacting larger areas and how they're going to have to make some changes. And I think that it was hard for people to see that we are the reason why it's here, right? Our kids have been disadvantaged, and I think we just have to figure out a different way to get that across, because I think they missed that piece.
So do you think so the whole notion of 127 is that some districts have to spend less to create space for some other districts who are lower spending and historically economically disadvantaged to spend more? So might they be thinking the additional spending that this district did might have been what the media was reflecting on in the districts that should be cutting?
Yes.
Okay. I was kind of getting the same impression.
Yes.
I think some people didn't understand that spending more didn't come from their tax dollars.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
I agree.
I think if we could do something to take our rate and say, okay, this is what the dollar increase per 100,000, because it was on one of the papers at one time, to say per 100,000 would be your increase or your, you know.
Yeah, I think, Morgan, you did that at one of the very bottom of the pages where you said if you were a $100,000 house, here's what it's going to be. I almost think that like front and center, because I think when it comes down to it, people just want to know, how is this going to look in my tax bill?
And it was a range, it was this to this, so I'm sure most people looked at the high one and went, ooh.
That was this weekend's communication.
Yeah.
I think there may still be a perception in the community that we raise the money to pay for our schools, and a misunderstanding that this is a whole statewide education funding system, and that intention of we were supposed to be able to raise more money without that impact on the tax rate, which we did. We could show that with the district tax rate. But I think we need to put our heads together on that, about how to communicate better.
And I think, I don't know if you said this at Bakersfield, where you had kind of broken it down and explained out of, you know, the 22 million or whatever, like only, what, 25%-ish is raised by taxes?
Yeah.
And then another 25% by the non-homestead and business, and then the rest comes from the state. I think that is something, and the few people I talked to, I kind of explained that, because that helped me understand it better. And when you really look at it like that, it's like, without this system, like, we would not, we were trying to run these 4 schools on a quarter of our budget, I mean, which is all that we're actually raising. So I think that's kind of an eye-opening statistic it was for me anyway.
Lisa Lisa, do you want to share thoughts? Is she with us now?
Lisa is on, but she's on her phone, so she can't talk, but I have the chat up, so everybody in the room can read it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with what Lisa's saying, and I think none of us are happy with what the results are right now. especially around the Cognia, the first look at what the Cognia assessments look like. And I know that this isn't helpful, but there are many ways that we measure student success, and we're trying to bring that data in to all of our meetings, like maybe not all of our meetings, but to a lot of our meetings to look at what just some of the other formative assessments in our SU level common assessment plan look like, and we can demonstrate growth, and we're consistently demonstrating growth. We can't demonstrate growth with Cognia because that was baseline that we got last year. Our ability to demonstrate growth on Cognia will come next year, hopefully sooner than it did, because this just barely was released to the public within the last 3 or 4 weeks. So our students are getting ready to start taking the Cognia assessment, which will be year 2 of the Cognia, and then we'll have comparative data when those get released next year. Again, hopefully much sooner. I think that the cost increasing, we're going to get to that in this conversation, and I think there's something that, we'll get to it a little bit later, but one thing that I will say is that education has had to shift in terms of what we're doing and how we're supporting our learners, because we do not have foundational systems around us that have capacity the way they have in the past. Schools have always relied on a well-resourced Department of Children and Families and a well-resourced mental health system. And we're living in a time where neither of those are well-resourced, and they're completely understaffed, and they're not as accessible to our students and our families. Those needs can't be ignored by us because they are in our face every day. And we're building systems that we've never had to build before. So being able to maintain and actually improve upon the academic outcomes is certainly a high priority for us. And at the same time, being able to make sure that our students are healthy and well, and able to function in our schools and in our communities is also a high priority. Lisa, I don't disagree with you about Vermont being a really expensive state to educate students in, and I think that you're well positioned in the legislature to have some of those difficult conversations, because I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but we have a lot of schools in the state of Vermont. I asked Morgan for some data today. Let me just flip screens and I can get to that. I think it's important for us to not be afraid of having some of those hard conversations. I think we continue to think that we're this tiny system up here in the Northeast, and we're actually not. We're the 13th largest system in the state of Vermont. We have 93 schools in our state that are smaller than our smallest school. 69 of those schools have less than 100 students in them, 17 have less than 50, and 4 have less than 25. And whenever a community, 2 examples happened yesterday, try to have the hard conversation about whether or not we can afford to continue to operate those super small micro schools, communities do not want to do anything about that, because people like having their own local communities. We have a lot of schools for the number of students that we have. We have a lot of supervisory unions and supervisory districts for the number of schools and students we have. We have to start taking a hard look there in terms of how we're actually funding public education. And the funding formula itself, like this year was a mess. I think you know that, Lisa, from being in the legislature. We all know that from the work that we've been doing. This is a short-term solution, what's happening this year. I do hope that there is interest in the legislature in doing some really hard work with education partners to try to figure out, is there a different way that we can fund public education in Vermont? Certainly Morgan and I are willing to go to the table and advocate for that. If we want to look at what other states are doing and decide that we're going to do a flat per pupil expenditure for how we fund schools, we'll come to the table and have those conversations. I think those are the things that we need to talk about as a state and as a community, and if we don't have those hard conversations, we're going to continue to struggle with how expensive education is in the state of Vermont. We're going to give you information about how our spending compares to the rest of the state, and I think if people are really listening to this piece, it should be really eye-opening. It does feel expensive. It feels expensive in people's tax bills, and again, we're funding the whole statewide education system. So all of our money goes to Montpelier and then it gets distributed back out to schools.
Why were such small schools kept open through the merger? Like the ones you're just describing, like micro and small
The
schools?
merger never was designed to close schools.
But didn't it
was
close?
merging boards.
Didn't it close some though? Like I thought Belvedere closed. and that was
Belvedere closed a
pretty-
long time
Oh,
ago.
okay.
No, I think what the hope was that with a larger board looking at a bigger geographic area over more schools, over more kids, that those communities would then, or those boards then would start to have those conversations. But those mergers were only governance, they were not schools.
Next.
We can go to the next one.
Oh. No, because I just added that one and it didn't add on yours.
Alright,
Sorry, we can get back to it later.
hold on. Let me refresh.
We just pulled in at the last second the graph that Lynn was mentioning in terms of the yield, and this is one which is probably a little more inside baseball than most voters are going to care about. And certainly for budget vote round 2, this history is no longer relevant, but it kind of talks about how we got here. So if you look at the bottom line on this graph, that's at $1.15, which is the tax rate for NMV for this year, FY24. The blue line, which is coming up, is sort of the history of what the tax rate was for the budget that you approved, or you signed off on January 3rd. So on January 3rd, when you approved that budget, you thought you were delivering a tax rate decrease based on the tax commissioner's yield of about a penny. You can see as the blue line moves forward in time, JFO did some adjusting, the yield went down and the tax rate went up to $1.17, which is I think where we probably warned, started printing things for the book. Dropped a little bit, and then you'll see that big spike at the end of January was when they tuned into the cost of all of those caps and all of those districts that were able to add a bunch of spending to their budgets without impacting their tax rate. That was impacting the yield and so impacting your tax rate. And then that kind of precipitous drop at about February 5th is when it became clear that H850 was going to pass in some form and take away that artificial tax rate cap. And so the $1.1047 or 5 cents down from last year's rate is the number that we had in terms of best information when we went into town meeting day. And so that was the number we used for the handout. It's actually, the yield has gone up a little tiny bit, and that has dropped probably to $1.10.3 for the same budget now. So just kind of shows you what a wild ride it's been for this budgeting season. And so I won't go into the goals or the heavy details around the inputs for that budget, but we did want to kind of refocus folks on the intention of Act 127. So NMV was historically disadvantaged in the way that we were counting students. That was a 20-year history from the beginning of this current funding model. The intent of Act 127 was to allow us in districts like ours to raise more money for the same tax rate and to provide more equitable opportunities for our students. The soft landing that they gave districts unfortunately came up with a tax rate cap, and so as we've mentioned before, several districts figured out that they could add a bunch of spending not intended under Act 127 and not have to pay for it. So districts that were protected by that cap, looked at a leaking roof that they hadn't been able to get a bond to cover and said, okay, well, we can put all this in to a 1-year budget. not pay for it and get those capital needs taken care of. H850 was the bill that reconfigured that so that perverse incentive was no longer there. And part of that bill was to allow those districts to rewarn their budget vote, pull it back, even though voting had already started. I had been asked at town meeting day why we didn't delay our vote. We had been asked a few times prior to that. And this was because, as you can see in that graph before, we were never adding spending in this district thinking that we were not going to have to pay for it. We always knew that there was still a linear relationship to what we spent and what our tax rate was. And so we did not have to delay our vote, as we'll go through.
We did not drive our spending up to the 5% tax rate cap.
Right. And so as we'll talk about later what that looks like statewide in terms of who has tapped into that provision. This is still a work in progress. I don't have all the numbers in here, but there are some pretty significant areas of budget increase that are going to be hard to change in the discussions we have in the next 2 weeks. The biggest, of course, is the high school tuition increase. We had 88 eighth graders that we're planning on paying tuition for, and only 40.5 graduating seniors that they're replacing. So almost $1 million in high school tuition. As we see who has successfully passed a budget in the state and what that might mean to tuition rates we're paying, we might be able to change that a little bit, but it's just as likely to go up as to go down. Health insurance for this district only is roughly $270,000 increase. The SU assessment, which is a big increase for both of our districts, some of the big movers on the SU budget, and you're not paying for all of this, but food service is up almost $500,000, and that is even with a fractional reduction again in terms of the people who are working in food service. And then the instructional support line, which is primarily where we're bringing those instructional coaches. We've paid for those 3 staff out of ESSER for the past 2 years, and that funding stream is coming to an end. These are the folks who are training our new teachers, which we still have a high percentage of, as well as hopefully in the future spending time in classes of seasoned teachers improving their instruction. Director of Educational Equity, the tech integrationist position that we actually pulled out of NMV and put into the SU is there, as well as additional BCBA support. We're the folks that are supporting the in-house programming that we have for special ed that Michelle DeBerge has talked about quite a bit. We're going to try to tease out what the increased salary cost is just for your returning teachers, so pull that number out of the increase in the number of positions. We also added about $169,000 in terms of building repairs into the NMV budget spread across your 4 schools. So not enough to do any major projects, but we decided to go that route rather than ask the voters to take some of the 2023 remaining fund balance money we didn't spend a year ago and put that into a capital reserve fund. So we actually used all of that money to drive down the tax rate. And then finally, the SRO position, which is new and will not show up in the ratios that we discuss later because it is district-wide, but a significant increase from last year.
And know that, and Morgan said this, it's a work in progress. We did all of this today, so there's a lot more teasing out of money that we'll need to do in the days ahead.
Again, no change from the presentations that we've been doing at board meetings since October. But you can see the history of the NMV tax rate, 4th decline, and overall a pretty significant drop from that first unified rate. But as you see with the CLA applied, it is driving those tax rates up pretty dramatically over these past 2 years because of the real estate market. Lynn had tipped earlier about some potential changes. You know, I don't think any of those are going to be quick, but one of the conversations that I've had with some folks in Montpelier is around taking that CLA and rather than applying it to this rate and having 4 different rates in our 4 different communities, you could apply that to your tax bill. So my $100,000 house, per the town clerk's grand list, would be showing up as a $120,000 or $130,000 fair market value house. I think that it certainly won't change the amount of money we need to raise or the money that we raise locally, but it will be easier to explain that to taxpayers, and so maybe take away one layer of the confusion on the tax rate calculation for folks.
And when we start the process of our formulating the budget, are we not looking at any CLA at that point?
We do not have that data until the very end of December.
But I mean, we know it's not gonna change, right? Like, all of our towns are gonna keep dropping, aren't they, until we get to the point of a reappraisal, which also is
Or
bad.
if the market changes, which is unlikely.
I'm just wondering, would it be more prudent in the future, or, or start where we left off, and then if it gets better?
So we do start where we left
Okay,
off. We know
yeah.
that next year we're gonna be starting in the 70s
Okay.
for all our towns. What would be useful, and I don't know if this is likely to happen, the tax department, when they come out with that December 1 yield, they have some data for CLAs that they're using for their modeling. I've been told it's not final, but it would be hugely helpful if they would just figure out a way to tip us, even if it's statewide, towns are going down 5% or 10%.
Is there any talk too from the state of them publishing it like sooner than?
There's not. I think they're publishing it once they get it and it's vetted. So I don't know that we're gonna see any official numbers anytime sooner, but.
I mean, it just always seems like we're chasing the dragon, or whatever the term is. Like, we're tasked with this huge budget and trying to figure it out and trying to present it honestly, and there's no way we can do that ever, it feels like.
Well, you can't present the tax impact honestly, and so we've been.
But that's all people care about, is we know.
That's true of any year though, because our yield even now won't be finalized until the legislature finalizes it probably sometime in May.
But that's what I mean, like, ever since I started, I just don't understand. It's like a crapshoot every year, and we're asking people, whose livelihoods, I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I just don't understand how this is a system that can be, like.
It's complicated for certain, and.
But just the timing of
uncertainty,
it, why is our budget and the whole, you know what I mean? Like, we should have time, and they should have time to review it.
I mean, this is a little bit flip, but if you think about a way to tax and fund education, it can be equitable, and it can be clear, and it can have local control, but it can't have all 3. You can basically have 2. And so what we've chosen in Vermont is a system that is very equitable, probably the most equitable nationwide, and probably the one with most local control nationwide. But it's confusing because, unlike, we were talking earlier, unlike a state like Massachusetts, where they say at the beginning, you're getting this much money, if you feel you need more money than that, your taxes are gonna go up and you have to budget. But certainly most of us would be in the box where we'd say, yeah, we can live with that, and we'll make sure that we stay under that budget. There's no real local control in that system.
But so
it's
why
clear,
is
and
the
right at the beginning.
And I'm sorry, I won't keep us too long on this, but why is the CLA coming out when it does? Is it based on just the calendar year sales, or what is it based on?
Yeah, I don't know the inner workings of the formula, but they're looking at property sales over a certain period and then backing that into what the grand lists are. I imagine it's a lot of work and a lot of number crunching,
But you would think if they operated on the same fiscal year as us, and if they did it, June to July, then they have.
Right.
Yeah.
They're gonna get it out before we have to warn budgets, but not much more.
But
And
then
if we could
change
have
that.
if we could have the initial numbers in December, at least we would know that we're going from 75 to 70-ish, and if it comes in at 69 or it comes in at 71, at that point, it's not a big deal. It's not a surprise, at least.
So, we talked about how this funding formula has shifted with long-term weighted average, and one of the legacy components is applying the CLA the way we apply it here, which a lot of people don't understand because they connect it to school spending. If there was a way for us to not apply it here, it would be, if you could go back 2 slides, Courtney, if we could communicate to our community, that's your tax rate based on our education spending, that would be understandable. All 4 of your towns would have that $1.10, that would be your education, your homestead tax rate. And then if the CLA was applied on your tax bill, we both assert that that would be more understandable because people could see, okay, here's the education tax rate, here's what my assessed value of my home is, but the state thinks my home is worth more than that or less than that based on the CLA, so this is how much it's gonna cost me. That would be understandable. But because it's done at the school level, people believe the CLA is directly tied to what that number is.
Well, that's been my takeaway this season as well, is that the schools are tasked with kind of taking the brunt of it. And it's just not, I don't mean to sound like a child, but it's not fair that, the schools have to. And when I have explained that to the people that I talk to, like you said, it's totally understandable. Like when you explain the CLA, just the separation of the 2 issues here. And then in those same conversations, they're like, well, yeah, I don't want to see, because I was like, if it's $200,000 assessed value, you could get a tax bill if it was up to par, at $250 or whatever. And then of course people are like, well, no, I don't want that, I don't want to see that. But that's essentially what is
It's the same thing.
happening.
They have to raise the
Exactly.
same amount of money, so either your tax rate goes up or how they apply the CLA to your overall value, like it's gonna, sorry.
Nope. Okay. So, you've seen this one before quite a bit. This is the current year budget divided by that new long-term weighted ADM for the current year. So you can see this is these are real numbers, and this is where we are this year. Because several budgets did
Before you go, Norman, in case there are people who are listening, what this represents, every line is a different school in the state. So the very bottom is the lowest spending school district at around $8,000. That's a non-operating school that tuitions their students out, to the very highest top spending school, which I don't know what that number is, but it is significantly higher than what our spending is. I just wanted to make sure we had that.
Sure. Again, that top one is at about 18,000. And so, again, this is current year actual numbers, and those 2 blue lines are the 2 districts in Franklin Northeast, Northern Mountain Valley, a little bit lower than Enosburg, again, this year. If you go to the next slide, you'll see Enosburg, Richford at the top of this, so we're only looking at that bottom 10th, Northern Mountain Valley, and these are the same pole positions of where we are in FY24, but what I did was I put forward the FY25 education spending per pupil for all of these districts. So the lines in green have all passed budgets, and at least according to the AOE, those numbers after them are the per pupil spending that they put forward to the voters. If any of these voted from the floor, they could have changed, or if the AOE got their data wrong, they could have changed. But so I don't want to own the data, but that's numbers coming from them. You'll see Holland at the bottom failed to pass their budget, and then NMV and Enosburg both failed to pass theirs. The 4 towns that are in black, 3 of them have not voted. I think it's Somerset is doesn't actually have a vote because I don't know that they have enough people there. I couldn't dig into it any deeper than that today. The reason that we put this up there is that if everybody on this chart had passed their budget, we in NMV with our 10,798, which is what went to the voters, would actually fall about 6 more positions on this chart. And so, I think you're gonna have discussions about the budget and what needs to come out to be respectful to the results that have come out, but we think it's important for this board, and we will have this conversation with Enosburg and Richford again, to keep reminding them that we are in a race to the bottom. And of these towns here, Holland doesn't operate a school at the bottom, Morgan does not operate a school at the bottom, Westfield does not operate their own school, so those 3 are tuitioning. Somerset, again, non-operating. Mount Anthony is one of the larger high schools, so they get some benefit from economies of scale. And then you get a couple other Northeast Kingdom towns in there that are running relatively small schools throughout. And so that's sort of where we are likely to be next year. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, it was interesting to see, if we change nothing in our budget, that's what the number is per long-term weighted average. And it was interesting to see how many positions we dropped to the bottom. So I hear what people are saying about tax rates and implications, and I hear what people are saying about education, and at the same time, we are trying to educate students in a system that is not declining, that has significant need, and has limited outside resources as well. So we are trying to pull all of those pieces together, and to see our spending continue to fall, it is discouraging, because we're at the same time also trying to attract teachers and keep teachers, and we're competing with people whose per pupil spending is, several $1,000s more per pupil than ours. And that's challenging to do.
And I will say there are a lot of, obviously 80% of the state is above us in terms of what they're spending this year. Some of them who are, going and having to revote a budget, they may drop. Certainly we will bring this data to you in the summer once we have it. But I don't think we're gonna go upwards, and I think that spread, that 8,000 to 18,000 is probably gonna be 8,000 to 20,000 once all the other votes are in. We have heard of some towns that spend a lot per kid and are losing kids in terms of their Act 127 weights, and so I know how math works, and those numbers are gonna have to go up.
So also today, Morgan and I, today and last night, because we spent a lot of time looking at data as it was rolling in last night, there were 29 school budgets around the state that were defeated yesterday. 14 school budgets around the state are regularly voted on after town meeting. They didn't delay, they just have a voting day that is after town meeting. There are 8 school budgets in the state who chose to delay. We're assuming that that's related to H850, and the thinking is that those systems likely pulled some of that added spending out of their budgets once the cap went away. So I think that's to the next slide, Morgan. I think it's good to segue into the yield.
And I'm just checking, that's 29, 8, and 14 are still accurate, or 3 districts that have not got results yet.
And that's 1/3 failed, 29, right?
29 versus 65 that were approved.
So out of all those that we just talked about, of the 29 that were defeated, it is likely that many of those districts will reduce spending to a certain degree. Of those that still haven't been voted on, we don't know if they brought spending down from their original projection or didn't. Of the schools who delayed, we suspect they did bring their spending down. So as spending across the state shifts, it's gonna have an impact on our dollar yield. And as that dollar yield goes up, it's gonna have a positive impact on us. I'm gonna let you take that part, Mark.
So then that was the graph that we showed earlier, as the yield increases, everyone in the state's tax rate will decrease. And so we are optimistic that the yield is gonna go in an upwards direction as we get more information about which budgets are defeated and being rewarned, and which budgets are had been pulled back, and what the reasons were for that. I don't know when we're going to start seeing those numbers. The Agency of Education, I'm sure, will start collecting information from districts that did pass their budgets, and they may start tipping the legislature about whether those numbers were coming in higher or lower than they expected. But it may be a month before we see that. And then I just wanted to tip this board, and we'll tip the other board, and it's kind of sad that we have to have this conversation, but there is a tax rate floor in Vermont, so your district tax rate can never go down below $1. There are towns like, I suspect the two at the bottom that we saw earlier, that because they are purely non-operating districts, they just look at the number of kids they have and the amount of tuition they have to pay, and that's their budget. They don't have anything discretionary. If that budget applied to the yield creates a tax rate of, say, 90 cents, they're still getting $1. You could say that they're leaving money on the table in that case, but they don't have any table to leave money on, so they don't care. If you're in a gore that has no kids, your tax rate's $1. And so we are likely getting close to that, especially if we do see a spike in the yield in the coming weeks. So I just want to, I don't want the first time you hear that to be the first time we see us crossing over that. And again, hopefully it's not, does not become an issue.
So other implications that we had to think about today and talk about are how does what's in the master agreement. Court, could you move the slide? There are master agreement considerations for the defeated budget. So we're in a position where our teacher contracts must go out no earlier than April 1st and no later than May 15th. This has been important to us because retaining our teachers is a high priority, and we know that for several years it's been very competitive in terms of hiring. I do think that there are some cuts coming from neighboring systems that might change the number of people applying, but there are not a lot of people in education programs. This is a problem not just in Vermont but across the country, where there are not a lot of people going into education. So it's very important for us to work on the retention piece. There's another deadline in there, and that has to do with reduction in force. So if we are going to reduce a position, we need to notify the employee by April 15th. We also need to produce a seniority list so that if we are cutting positions, that we have to do it in that reverse order of seniority to make sure that whoever gets the RIF is the lowest in terms of seniority. And there's some other language about the licensure categories we'll have to attend to as well. Another thing that for us to consider too is that we're in the midst of ongoing support staff negotiations, so that's something we're attending to. I am inclined to recommend that we move forward and push most of the contracts out by April 1st. However, we're going to have some hard conversations, and there may be some positions that this board and the other board decide that they are not going to build in the budget, or they might have a contingency plan that would be a position that gets reduced if a budget is defeated. So you're going to have to make those decisions about reductions in force. I'm going to recommend that we do that as early as possible, and that I'm able to notify people by April 1st instead of April 15th. Because if at all possible, I think that we owe it to our kids to create as much stability in terms of the staff will be returning next year as we possibly can, So if we could still offer the majority of contracts by April 1st, that would be my priority. I'll be recommending that, obviously, to this board, also to the SU board, and to the ER board.
Lisa, just put in the chat when our contracts due back by.
So it's generally 2 weeks, Lisa, so if they go out on April 1st, we have the early signing bonus that we already announced. So if teachers return, if contracts go out on April 1st, they have until 4:30 on April 5th to qualify for that. Beyond that, they have essentially 15 days to sign that, so somewhere around April 15th. They can have an extension, so they can go through until May 1st. And then I don't offer extensions beyond to that May 1st period we start looking, because it's very hard to hire once you get into May. So, anything you want to add to that, Morgan? Okay.
So we've got new timelines. I picked April 30th just so I could start looking at backing into it and what we're going to need to do. So there's nothing magic about that. You do need to have an informational meeting no more than 10 days before your Australian ballot vote for your budget. So we need to keep that in mind. You are allowed to have more, and I've certainly, we'll talk about communication strategy. I've certainly encourage you to have more, but there's a legal requirement to have one within 10 days. And then we need to warn this budget in the 30 to 40 day prior window. So for an April 30th vote, which is the Tuesday after school break, we would have to get something probably in the messenger on the 29th of March, which means warning a budget by about the 26th of March. So if you think about what date you're going to vote and you bring it back about 35 to 40 days, that's the timeline in terms of the warnings. If you did it on...
I have a clarifying question, Morgan.
Yep.
So with this proposed timeline, I need a little clarification of how this intersects with what Lynn was just talking about on the prior slide as far as dates around contract, if we do have to consider a reduction in force.
It doesn't connect well with that schedule, and I don't know that it can. So I do not see you having a second budget vote before those decisions are made. You could warn it, but if we were going to push that back 2 weeks, it would mean having a budget like tonight and getting it in the paper this Friday.
So I think that's the tricky part, and that's where the contemplation of the reduction in force comes in. So there may be some employees, as you're making your decisions, it's probably not going to be tonight. We're going to have another meeting when you get into the details of the budget. We may have to let some people know that there are positions that are at risk of being reduced, so we won't offer those contracts, but we will reconsider it after the budget goes through. If it passes, we'll offer the contracts. If they don't, then we would reduce those contracts. One of the reasons that we're aiming also for April 30th is, we're hopeful, we're going to go back to the community that we will have a favorable result in terms of the budget vote. If we do not have a favorable result, we want to have enough time so that we could have a third budget vote before June 30th. And by pushing it to April 30th, it still allows us time to get a third one in if it's needed before the end of June.
So the last Tuesday in June is June 25th, and that budget would need to be warned in probably the May 18 through 2021 timeline.
So we're going to talk about communication plan next, Lisa, and I think we'll get to your question there.
And yes, Lisa, there is a requirement for an informational meeting. I just don't know what the date would be on that. In this case, it would have to be after April 20th. but could be any time in that window.
So I think on the next slide, we had some conversations about communication planning, and certainly I think we need to up that, especially because we're identifying that there's a lot of misconception and confusions about what we put forward. So I think that the voter checklist that we took a look at today, as I said, we just picked one town, went through, and we found 40 people that didn't vote. We can have conversations with those people, and not just the 40 people, with our staff and with other members of our community, to try to make some personal connections and have conversations about the budget. We can make ourselves available for coffee and conversations, much like when we worked on the bond project, and we worked on Act 46, and we land at the Dairy Center or at Moritz or Bernie's or wherever, and make ourselves available for people that want to come out and learn more. Because I do genuinely think I can sympathize with where people are, because we've been inundated with a really negative narrative around education spending in Vermont, and I mean, I understand, I get it, I've had frustrations myself around this for different reasons, because I see where we are, and as Morgan said earlier, it feels like we're in a race to the bottom in terms of being like the lowest spending system in the state, and that's not something that I love, certainly as a leader, because that does impact what we can offer our students in terms of opportunities and resources. So I want to talk about that with community, and I hope that you as board members and as leaders will help us in some of that communication. I think that it would be wise for us to do informational meetings in each of our communities. It's going to be an investment though on everyone's part, because our evening time is precious. This gets into baseball season. We're still gonna have to do that if we want to really get the word out with our communities. I think continuing to use social media. We may look at mailers differently for this budget vote. Posting things and having physical artifacts at town clerks and libraries, websites. I would love to hear if other people have ideas or thoughts about other ways in which we can engage people in conversations and communicate.
Maybe you could use the baseball games, schedule the meeting before or after a game in each community when people are already there.
You're gonna make me go back to Little League games?
I'm saying that half joking, but it might actually work
It's true.
to reach more people.
Could be spring events too, Halloween concerts.
I actually think that's a really good idea, Kat.
How about after the game at the Pine Cone, over ice cream?
Oh, pine cone, because everybody's there. That's a good idea.
You can see me, Coach.
So, any other thoughts on that?
Potentially offering childcare, so families.
That would be a good community service opportunity, right, for like 8th graders or stuff.
So I think that, one thing that we might want to do, and I'm thinking it's a next meeting thing, Morgan, is to have each of you take a look at your voter checklist for your communities. Maybe the Bakersfield representatives sit together, and the Berkshire and Sheldon and Montgomery sit together and say, I know these people, I'm gonna make sure I have a conversation and see if I can get them to come out to vote. The other thing, I just had someone today say to me, well, I wasn't registered, so I couldn't vote. I think there's some misconceptions around that. You can register on the day of. It isn't like it used to be that so many days have to pass. So I think making sure that people understand if you're not gonna be in town, you can get an absentee ballot, all of those pieces as well. Anything else, Ryan?
Nope.
I was at our polling place the entire time, and one thing I noticed is the lack of parents of students. So really get on those people too, to say, childcare is obviously a big issue at that age level.
So now you are in the unenviable situation of having to navigate this and trying to figure out what direction you want to give your administrators. So we've gotta think about, in this version of the budget, what are our priorities? We have to think about the spending decisions you made, what you are still invested in, what you wanna put on maybe a watch list, and what you want to recommend to eliminate potentially. I think you wanna take an opportunity to hear from your principals and think about principal recommendations. And then I think the other piece is that I think this is tough because you all represent a merged, unified board. And your lens has to be on the whole, it can't be on a singular community. So I think that you're going to have to try really hard to think about those decisions through that lens. And you're gonna have to figure out, what are you gonna do when you get to a place where you don't agree? How are you gonna make those decisions? And I wonder if that is, I mean, obviously we still would like you to ask us for our district level recommendations as well, but I wonder if there's a conversation that the board wants to have just about decision making before you jump into this. I mean, I could make a recommendation if there's no discussion.
I think that it would be helpful, I mean, I'm not sure where we're gonna end up tonight. I think we have some really tough conversations to navigate. I think it would be helpful to just make sure that each of us has a copy of the slideshow that Morgan, that you used for the informational meetings, that breaks down some of the positions that we are slated to put in that haven't filled yet, that were in the budget. It would just be good to have a bit of a reminder around some of those. It would be, I mean, and what's vaguer, right, and a little trickier is we know there are things that we cannot flex on, i.e. our high school tuition. That was $1 million, that alone, of this, of the budget increase. So there are things that are kind of codified and unmovable, and so just we're gonna have to try to get a sense of what can we flex on, what could we phase in perhaps, we can't do it this year, but perhaps in a future year, and how do we start kind of prioritizing those. But I also agree that there was so much confusion around equating the increase in the tax, the amount of the budget with the increase in the tax rate. I heard that from many people. So, there was a messaging component that we've already talked about tonight, about really starting to help people understand this enormously complex funding structure and what the actual implication is for their tax bill. It's going to be all of these things. We want to try to, if there are ways we can streamline the budget, absolutely. But I agree with Lynn that I don't want to feel trapped in this race to the bottom funding, because we want to see, we want to see improvements around proficiencies and all of these benchmarks, but spending less and having fewer opportunities isn't the way forward, in my estimation, to getting the results that we all want to see for our learners.
So there is a little more information that I feel like I maybe misplaced this slide. There's a little more information. We just wanted to plant these seeds with you about how you're going to be able to get there from here. And I think you might be in a place that I'll just say, if you get into a difficult conversation on, are you going to cut this or cut that or hold this and hold that, I think you may want to agree that there might be a time where you have to make a decision that it doesn't feel as good and there's not consensus. And you might just want to make sure everybody's had an opportunity to be heard, and then use a protocol where someone could call a decision to question. And then you vote on whether or not, you're moving on something or not. And you might just, I think it would be healthy to just agree before you get into the place where you're disagreeing, how you're going to handle that when you get to that tricky spot.
Yeah, I hear that, Lynn, and, right, I agree that we're gonna need to have some tough conversations, and this is not gonna be easy, and yeah, it may be, I think it's not often that the board isn't in a place of consensus around really, most issues, but this may end up being one of those times, and we'll just need to be able to do it in a really respectful, thoughtful way, and have a good process, and we know when it is time to move forward to a vote, and we can, because we do have a deadline here, and we need to get to a place where we can put another budget forward for our constituents.
So we have just a few more slides that give you the last of the data that I think that you're going to need.
Yeah, and before we go on, Lisa's got a question, which I'm just going to say generally about the SU budget. And just so folks know, we have an SU board meeting planned for
Monday?
Tuesday. And so the same conversations will be happening with the SU board then.
So you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, I'm on the wrong slideshow, sorry.
So we are going to do the beginning of a look at staffing and ratios as well as programming to kind of set the stage here. I will say you've seen as a board, and certainly administrators as well, have seen different versions of looking at ratios in terms of how many grown-ups per kid in different iterations. We've got updated data here. It is very rough, and we'll be fine-tuning it and double-checking it as we move forward. What we're looking at are our projections next year for student counts versus version 1.0 of the budget. All of the positions that are in your local budget, and then those positions at the SU that we know are allocatable to different schools, such as special educators, behavior technicians, to some extent the BCBAs that we split out between schools. No change to the enrollment, just something that we will keep putting up there and will be updated next October. But again, in the long term right now, anticipating 3 of our schools to be relatively flat in terms of their population, and then expecting a pretty steady increase in Sheldon Elementary. So again, looking at ratios, the first version of the FY25 budget with projected FY25 kiddos. The 4 schools in NMV each get a row. The first 4 columns are looking at staff in 4 broad categories, and then the 5th column is lumping them all together. And so these are the number of kids per, in the first column, per teacher, and that would include classroom teachers, interventionists, UA teachers, guidance counselors, nurses, anyone who's operating under a teaching license. So it's not class size by any stretch of the imagination. Column 2 are kids per paraeducator. Column 3 are kids per administrator. We have athletic director in there because that's how we have to classify athletic directors. Not relevant for this side, but will be coming up on the ER side where they have people in that position. And then finally, kids per other, and so this would include your custodians, your secretaries, your tech people, and then finally kids per total adult in those categories. And in the last column, the governor's been beating the drum of getting to 5 kids per adult. That final column is what it would take in terms of a reduction to get to 5 kids per adult, and a reduction over the current budget. So again, don't put a lot of faith in the actual numbers. They are close, but we will continue to tweak them, and we've kind of had this ongoing thing of trying to look at that supervisory union budget and say, okay, yeah, we were paying these people out of the SU, but really this one belongs to Berkshire, and this one is split between Bakersfield and Montgomery, or what have you. Your warning, when we do decide to go back to the voters, we'll have only this one article. The other ones that we sort of needed to pass have all passed, so it will just be a one vote, yes or no, on that.
Do we have them?
Morgan,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry to interrupt, this sounds a little funny, did I cut you off, Kat? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Morgan, can you go back to the slide prior, the chart? Okay, so I have a couple questions. In Berkshire, we have not yet hired an assistant principal there, correct?
That is correct. So this would include any positions you have in your budget, whether they are staffed or not.
Okay, so do you know what that number is of kids per admin in Berkshire without the addition of the assistant principal?
If you remove that position, that number would double. So it would go to 196. Because
196,
because
okay.
they would have one administrator in the budget and 196 kids anticipated.
Okay, I'm confused why in that final column, you said that with the 5, this kind of number that the governor has kind of highlighted. The 6.9 positions at Berkshire that would have to be reduced to get there, why is that so much higher than the other schools?
I think I would need a little time to dig into that. I do know that they have a high number of one-on-ones tied to specific kids from NCSS that other schools do not have currently. And so I think, the warning with this is that it's a good big picture look at what's going on in our schools, but when we drill into the details, there's a significant difference if you have a paraeducator who's a general classroom paraeducator versus someone who is tied specifically to an IEP.
So we're not suggesting that those are the reductions that you make, that's informational, just in terms of people are hearing the thing about the 1 to 5 for the ratio. That's been something that's been flying around there for a while.
Right, no, I understand that, Slim.
And then when you get into the discussions, we know that, 4.4 kids per versus 4.49 kids per is really, it's not always a useful concept because it's so theoretical. And so this was an attempt to say, okay, yeah, if you wanted to get to this arbitrary number, this is how many positions you would cut.
My question, Morgan, was kind of related to this, like the next one, just more the bigger picture. No, sorry, that one. I mean, just, I was thinking, no, the next one. But like, as far as the total amount that we're spending and the increase from year to year in the slide you showed us earlier on, what were the increases from year to year? Was it like 3 to 5%? But now this year, what we had proposed was more like, was it 17%? So do we have kind of like a bigger picture idea of what we want that 17% to be reduced to before presenting it to the voters again?
That's exactly what you're gonna have to try to get to tonight, is to give us some direction of, you know, this budget went down by 49 votes, like what would be a respectful, a respectable budget to put back to the voters? To what level are you asking us to relook at this? Because I think we were, remembering that 127 encouraged us to get out of the bottom by using that additional tax capacity. That's why that 17.9% was there. You didn't have a 17.9% impact on your tax rate because we got that added tax capacity. So how far do you want us to look is what you will have to tell us.
And this, you've seen this ad nauseum, just a reminder of where you can make impacts on this budget. Again, I will certainly be happy to go back and look at estimates that we have made and to see if they're still accurate. Tuition, being that light blue 1/3 of the pie, will be one of them, but I can't guarantee that when I look at it, I'm gonna come back with a smaller number. It may be a bigger number, depending on what else has been going on since December, January, when we last had this conversation. But if you take tuition out of the picture because it's something you're obligated to pay, you've got, you know, half of your budget is in your people in the red. Those other services are largely the supervisory union, which again is largely transportation, food service, and special ed. And we'll be having this discussion on Tuesday as well at that level. And again, that little green wedge is your crayons and paper, and not going to move the needle significantly looking at that 2.7% of the budget. Just recapping the additions that we have made in this budget, version 1 of this budget compared to FY24. I feel we've kind of beaten this horse quite a bit, but very briefly, in Bakersfield, an additional day of music, bringing that teacher up to full-time, 2 days of a family engagement coordinator, bringing that over from ESSER. In Berkshire, addition of a half-time health teacher, reduction of a full-time interventionist, 3 days of a family engagement coordinator, 2 of which they currently have in their building paid out of ESSER, and that 0.6 in theory would be combined with the 0.4 in Bakersfield. And then, as Mary brought up, the addition of the assistant principal at 1.0. In Montgomery, addition of a half-time health teacher, addition of 1 and change of paraeducators. The 1 is an actual new human, the 0.15 is related to hours with the early ed program paraeducators. 1 day a week of a family engagement coordinator, which is what they have out of ESSER currently, and they're bringing their half-time custodian to full-time. In Sheldon, the addition of a health teacher, addition of a STEM teacher, 4 days a week of a family engagement coordinator, and then an additional shared office assistant / paraeducator on a 50-50 position. District-wide, removing the health teacher position that's been advertised and not filled, so that's somewhat offsetting at least some of the additional health teachers in the local budgets. Reduction of the tech integrationist, which was in addition to the SU budget, as we believe that person can serve all 8 schools rather than just year 4. And then the addition of an SRO district-wide. So I think that's it for this slideshow.
So is there a direction that the board wants to give us? Is there things that you're ready to put on the table to discuss now, or Do you want us to go back, have our SU meeting, have our ER meeting, have our meetings with the leaders?
I just wanna make one more comment about the percentage, because you also had a slide that showed kind of the breakdown of the 3 million increase. And when I looked at that and just kind of did the quick math, it looked like the only thing that we could control are basically the positions, like 800 and something thousand, and I guess the SRO. And just again, looking at it from bare bones, like starting point, if you just reduce that, it's still a 12% increase. And again, in my mind, like that's a starting point, but I don't even know if that is the right starting point.
If you're saying if you wiped out the 800,000.
Yeah. You'd go from a 17% to maybe a 12% increase still. If I did the math right.
So now,
So Lisa is saying that she'd like us to have time to chew on this and hear what the SU discussion is next week and come back at the next NMV meeting. I mean, I'm inclined to agree, it is an awful lot to try to digest. It's already 8:45. I do want to be mindful of the late hour. We still want to hear from Lynn as well as our principals, and this is a really important and I don't think free conversation.
I also agree with that. Some of the things that just are running through my head that I'm just struggling with is such low voter turnout. I mean, in Sheldon, 13% of our population voted in Sheldon. And I know that there's a lot more than that in town who talk about the budget and talk about the school and the kids. So I just said why? So what outreach can be done? Like you had said, Lynn, there's gonna be a lot of work here to engage people. What are the barriers? Are people just over it? The political landscape's not fun, people don't wanna vote, blah, blah, blah. Like what is the what? And I'm really trying to get to the heart of that, because if we would have lost by 200 votes, I feel like that would be better than losing by 49. I feel like with outreach, appropriate education, I think that we can really inform people and get to the heart of the why. I'm making a list of people who I'm gonna be like, did you vote? Did you vote? And I also want to know, if you said no to the budget, tell me why. And explain to me why in a very thoughtful, respectful manner. And I really do wonder how many people just said no because of the hype in the media, because of what's on the news, and 20% increases. I think people have a sour taste in their mouth from what's been portrayed in the media, and we're suffering. Our kids are going to suffer as a result. So from my perspective, that's what I would like to dig in Sheldon and really get behind the why and the understanding of the budget, and what people grasp and what they don't.
What I think is not gonna make you feel any better, but it's an interesting data point, is that looking over the past 4 years, you've basically had the same number of people vote yes on the budget. And this year you had a significantly higher turnout, and it was higher turnout of no's, and I don't think it's coincidental that it was a presidential primary year. When you do a budget vote in April or May, we are gonna need to be pleading with people to just remember when to vote. We can do all the communication planning that we want, and this is not about, turning out one type of voter versus another. This is just getting anybody in our towns to pay attention.
And I'm also really concerned about the teacher contract deadline, and if we start saying that, or telling teachers or staff that we're potentially going to cut their position, we've lost them. I mean, how could we not lose them at that point?
Or
They're
the
gonna
fear
go.
before that even happens. Before that
Right,
conversation
exactly.
even
If you're
happens.
told it's on the line, we don't know, we're sorry, we can't tell you, and it's now hiring season, they're gonna be right there looking for who will scoop them up.
Absolutely.
So that really scares me to start delving into the existing numbers of staff and teachers.
Well, I'm really concerned too, like Emily, that our numbers were low on turnout overall, not compared to other years. We just have terribly low turnout in the first place. But if we can get more people out, rather than taking away positions that we know our kids need, and that we're going to have to sacrifice those to get a pass, I just, I'd rather spend my time beating the bushes and driving people to the vote.
I just don't know how much more to the bottom we can get, like you guys have said, like we're bare bones, it feels like.
I mean, we could be down the bottom 4 of school.
That's if your spending stays the same.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, and those bottom 4 don't have schools.
That's really like a kick in the.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Yeah.
Because these are our students. I would say, like, my 2 cents is that, I feel like we have to go back with some sort of cut, because that's just out of respect to the voters. But if it's going to have to come, I want it personally to come from positions that are not filled yet.
Yeah, totally.
I also don't want to take on what was used with ESSER, and now we're telling them, well, that money went away, but we're going to just absorb that, and we're going to put them in. So I fear that that's out there too. And my other thought is, we look at it, we have a lot of personnel who aren't directly involved with students. And we also need to look at those positions that are we losing somebody who's right there with the kids or with the families? So I don't know. I don't know.
And to take the mindset that if we do need to cut positions that are, in the budget now but aren't filled, that's a not right now instead of a done forever on the chopping block. It's a down the road, because they're important. We sat for many hours talking about how every single one of those is important to the instruction of children, both academically and emotionally, so they can access the academics. And so if we do go down that route, I want to hopefully take that mindset that it's just not right now.
I just worry that, again, anybody that we send out a RIF to, or a position that we don't increase, or like the SRO, is that his position? That we'll lose that possibility. That some people, I'll say it, the music teacher, that she says, I've tried to be full-time, I'm done, I'm out of here. So we have to be mindful of the impact they'll have on all our kids if we end up with positions that we wanted to get and we can't get in, that type position.
I think you and Aaron are saying things that are maybe not completely dovetailed in terms of, I think what you said, Aaron, is that you don't want to cut positions that are tied to people who are here.
Right.
And some of those ESSER positions are people who are tied, are actually they're people who are here.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying one is right or the other is right. I just wanted to put that out on the table. In terms of making the judgment of what types of positions are more student-facing rather than others, or more important, I would hope that the board would largely defer to your building leaders to determine that, because I know that we can just, us, and we have a lot of interaction with them, we can look at those ratios and say, oh, you've got too much of this, and it's not necessarily reflecting the reality of the buildings. And we talked about how you've got specific student needs that are different from one building to the other. So I hope that you would you value their input as we go through this process.
I also hope that you remember that we built a budget that was largely tied to the board goals that we've established for the organization. The reality is, I know that it is not always visible what the positions do that don't work directly with students. But at the same time, if we're going to continue to move the system for the students, we need to have people who work directly with teachers who work with programming and who take care of money and grants and things like that and curriculum. Those are all incredibly important positions that I just don't want to lose sight of, because the other piece is, I know that, we hear people say, well, the ESSER positions, there are some family positions that are embedded in there, and there are also some positions that are directly tied to supporting our new teachers, and without that support, I think that we're gonna see not the same level of success with those new teachers, and that is the single greatest impact for student learning is the quality of the teacher. So we have to think about what's the role of the people that aren't maybe.
And I think maybe that's part of that communication piece.
Yeah.
Because our communities don't know
Yeah.
what these people do. Even right in our district, the family engagement or whatever, who are they engaging with, what has it done, what's the impact on kids?
Yeah, I hear.
Yeah.
So, so as far as next steps, and I haven't forgotten that Jared has a question related to the slideshow, so I'm still putting a pin in that. We have a doodle out, correct, to have a special meeting. Courtney, has that been finalized, that time and date yet?
I have tried and I cannot get into Doodle. Yeah, it's doing the same thing that it was doing before. It keeps saying it's about to cross, so I keep trying, and once I can get in, I'll let you know.
Okay, that sounds great. Lynn, it seems as though it might be helpful and important to the conversation at the next meeting when we really dive into how we're gonna present, what we're gonna be presenting in the next iteration of the budget. It would be helpful for, as Morgan mentioned, to hear from the building leaders about all of those additions that were on the slides, that we were to do that kind of accounting again. I know we did this before, but in light of the current situation, it would be helpful to revisit that accounting of especially the new additions, those various positions, and also I would like to revisit the elective conversation and breakdown across the schools.
So we can bring that back next time, and the principals have already begun thinking about we asked them today to start thinking about, thinking about your budget, what would be your priorities to keep, and what would be the things that, you would be, not that you want to let go of any of it, but how would you rank them? So they're already doing some of that thinking. We'll be together with the principals next Thursday, which will be in advance of the next time this board comes back together, so maybe we can get a little closer. So it might be helpful for the board to just think about, to Kat's point about I think it was you, Kat, it's discouraging to think about the race to the bottom. So you've got 49 voters that made a difference in this. How deeply do you feel you need to cut in order to present a budget that's respectful and responsive to what you heard from your voters? Is something I want the board members to think about between now and then. And I want you to also think about your goals and what is it that we want to guarantee for the students that we're serving at the same time, and finding a way to balance those two needs.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn.
One ask, just curious, it might be helpful, maybe it's just for my own mind. Morgan, is there a way to back out all the new proposed positions, pretend that those weren't even on the table, and then tell me what the percent increase would be without those?
The percent increase of the budget?
Without the new positions?
Yes. But not-
I'm just curious.
I could pull that together.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Emily, to
Thanks.
Morgan's point, because I thought that was a good point, Morgan, that some of those ESSER positions are people that we already have, so would you want to see?
You do both,
Yeah, do both.
like the ones.
I think I want them included or backed out, if you will, because we're asking for new money, if you will. I'm trying to understand trying to understand if we were trying to say we're not hiring any of these new positions, your budget would still be at a 12% increase. I feel like it's important for the community to know that our budget, we're not just throwing out all these new positions and all these frills. You can back out all of these positions and you're still looking at an X% increase. I think it would be important to know and to convey.
I think the other thing to think about is you're looking at it through the lens of what's the percent increase on spending. And remember that intention of 127 was to increase the spending for the opportunity piece. So is that where you're wanting to look at driving down your percentage increase, or are you wanting to look at cent impact on your tax rate is the other piece. So if we look at it through the lens of, when Morgan and I looked today, I asked him, about how much money would you have to reduce to gain a penny on the tax rate. I think it was around 200,000, Morgan. So we also could look at it through that lens, and just as a reminder, we're going to be looking around and listening to what's happening with our colleagues around the state, and if those budgets are being reduced around the state, our yield is going to improve for us, which will also gain pennies on our tax rate, right? And we're getting close to that floor of $1 on the tax rate. So even if you reduce, Morgan, I might be going into uncharted water here, stop me if I'm going the wrong way. But if you reduce and focus on dropping your spending percentage-wise, you might be at the floor where it doesn't matter if you're reducing it more, you're not gonna be reducing
So you're
it.
saying
And
this
that's,
is-
yeah, no, go ahead, because that was my question, when he said we were close to the floor.
we're at
But
110.
what else can we do than reduce?
So we
I mean,
can
it
sit and
sounds-
wait and see where everybody else lands, and we potentially may not have to do anything.
Is everyone else
Is that what you're
waiting and
saying?
seeing?
Well, I don't know what I'm saying. I think that's part of the problem. We're all trying to navigate this. I don't want us to wait in terms of delaying our vote, but I think we can anticipate that the yield is going to improve because some budgets have gone down and because some people chose to delay, hopefully to take some money out of their budgets. And when that's known in the next week or two, maybe it's a week or two, I'm not sure the timeline, hopefully they'll start tipping that the yield is improving at the state level. And then that will inform our conversation at the next meeting as well.
Because it may, we get down to $1, we don't want to cut positions.
Right, but
That
in the
doesn't make
next
sense.
vote, will the voters see any change? Will they understand that the yield has changed? That's the big
Yeah.
question, that's what I'm concerned about.
We're all gonna have to.
And that's how we're gonna have to get the word out somehow.
And back to Emily's original question, I think it goes hand in hand, talking about it in percentages for those who understand it that way, but then also, yeah, it would still be a 12% increase, which is still a, 5-cent increase or whatever it is, having all those talking points.
Yeah. It's tough stuff.
I think it's huge is what you said, that a 12% increase does not mean your taxes are going up 12%.
Right.
That's because that's what's been heard.
Can you correct what I said, because I think I probably didn't get it exactly right?
Can you repeat what you said?
Incorrect, I don't know if I can or not. So if we think about, focusing on getting our percentage increase of our budget down to a certain level, if at some point, does that drive us to the floor where it won't matter if we keep spending or keep cutting and keep cutting? The floor is the floor, it's gonna be $1.
So right now, if the yield doesn't change at all, you cut $2 million out of your budget, you would be at the floor. As the yield goes up, that number that you cut goes down. And so the real variable right now is that the yield has been so unpredictable and based on such shifting information in terms of what other districts are spending, because it is a statewide system, and if somebody adds $10 million to their budget and gets that passed, it impacts everybody. when that $10 million now comes out because they couldn't get it passed or they're afraid of getting it passed, you know, that's, historically, that would be a penny on the tax rate. So 10 of those districts making that decision puts us down to $1 without us cutting the budget. I don't think the impact's gonna be that great, and, you know, I suppose there are worse conversations to have than we're going to the voters with a tax rate of $1. But I just wanted to tip everyone to that possibility.
I do feel as though the tax rate piece is the bigger kind of driver for our voters, versus the positions and themselves, you know, down to 0.4 this, 0.6 this, 1.0 that. I would like to think that will trust us to not add all unnecessary staffing in the buildings. I mean, we really are being so thoughtful about what the needs are in these schools and the people, their various areas of expertise required to accomplish our goals. And I think there was a huge amount of misinformation of equating that $3 million figure and what that percentage of the increase was. Ergo, a through line was drawn to therefore my taxes are going up by that percentage, which couldn't be further from the truth. So, you know, at the same time, it would be helpful, what levers can we pull on that might pull that tax rate down a little, while knowing that we have some time, a little bit of time, not a lot of time, to see how the yield is affected when other systems start working their budget as well. Because I have felt all along, as I think people feel similarly on the board, that there was not a lot of fat on the bones here of the budget, and that there was this kind of incredible opportunity with Act 127 to get a little bit more opportunity for our students. And we're gonna just have to thread that really difficult needle in the next couple of weeks. The audit of staffing would be really helpful. Revisiting the elective piece will be helpful. And communicating with our voters on either side. If you voted for the budget, we want to let those people know that we hope they'll come back out and vote again in favor. And those who didn't, how can we try to address some of their concerns and possible misconceptions that might be driving that no vote?
I think the best thing board members could do between now and the next meeting is get curious with your friends and neighbors, community members, and talk to people and ask questions and hopefully hear what their concerns are, because that might be able to inform the direction the board takes at the next meeting.
So are people comfortable if at this point we put a pin in this and save this more in-depth conversation for the meeting, the next meeting that Courtney will work on organizing? And it sounds like Lynn and Morgan, you'll be able, and our principals will be able to bring some of those pieces that board members have asked for to help kind of guide our roadmap moving forwards.
Yes.
And so I guess before we move on to our superintendent report, I did want to circle back to Jared, who I know had a question.
Thank you. I've heard a few times the voter checklist mentioned to be able to identify different groups that may not have voted. And I think I heard it mentioned that you're able to identify 40 voters from the school district that did not vote. And first of all, how are you able to identify those voters? And
weren't voter checklists supposed to be confidential? They're not?
They're public and you
They're
can
public
request them
information.
from the town clerks.
Okay.
You obviously don't get to see how people voted, but you see
Sure.
who voted
You
in
can.
primary or the school vote.
All right, well, thanks for clarification.
No problem.
Wait around that.
What's that?
So wait around that.
I said-
I said, I'm waiting for that clarification.
Oh.
So,
I had a couple, that's why I was here mainly with the board, if I could, just a couple questions. Before I started, thank you, everybody sitting at the table, the board members on the screen. You have a complete thankless job, but I appreciate that you're doing it. So I think the louder voice that ran out going into this was that the taxes are going up, it's all the school's fault, and that's kind of what pushed, like we said, and it wasn't able to get overrun with actual facts. And some of it looking, so direct instruction to me, like I just went through some numbers while we were sitting here, and as far as the staff changes, so I assume that's anybody, like the music program, the health programs, the teachers, all that stuff that's involved there, is only going up by 16% to include everything. And I think just some of the others, like central services was a 44%, so coming out is kind of like, that's a huge number. I think looking at some of the slides that we're going, that includes stuff like the healthcare, the food programs. So I think getting some of that stuff out to the community, so they know when I look at it, because I looked at central services as this building, and was like, how is it going up 44% for our schools and 32% for the Enosburg, Richford schools for this year, that it makes a lot more sense. We tell them, well, this is what's covered under central services, this is what's covered here. I believe you mentioned that we only actually cover about a quarter of this $22 million board. No idea about that. I didn't do the math for residents, I just assumed that 4 towns were covering $22 million. That's what we're doing. That may help if they realize that. Because the other thing in here, like I looked on state revenue, so state revenue says it went down 76%, but is it really if they're covering 3/4 of the budget, or somewhere else besides our tax money is covering 3/4 of the budget? We're not really, I don't know, it doesn't look as bad to me as when I hear that quarter number versus everything else I'm looking at. And then the last thing I think I want to touch on, but I don't know if I understand, is the CLA. We've tied it to the school, and we look at it and we say, oh, it's going up because the numbers are going down, and again, it's in your funding, so it's the school's fault. But it's really the towns that it falls on. And I think we put the word that it's not to come to the school board, it's to go to your select board and tell them to fix this issue and to get those numbers back up so the rate comes back down. It won't be such a jump. Maybe it's something we can show them that, hey, we're at 70, for Bakersfield, 74% now. If you got the select board to get their job done and get it to 80, it would be this number. If they got it to 90, it could be this number. And if they get it all the way to 100, it would sit here. And we may be able to get the public to realize, okay, it's in this board, it's stuck to schools, but it's not the school board that's gonna fix it. It's your town, it's your select board that's gonna actually fix it. And you need to start pinging on them to do something about it.
Can I just correct something?
Yes, go ahead, absolutely.
It isn't actually the only way to change the CLA is to go through a reappraisal, a townwide reappraisal. And the difficulty is every community in Vermont is in the same boat right now. So we spoke with the town clerk in Enosburg, who they're kind of in the queue for a reappraisal. They've approved it. I think she said they've got a 2 to 3 year wait before they can get the people, and then another 2 year wait on top of that. So it isn't that the town could do anything else other than get themselves in the queue for the reappraisal. That's really the only thing they could do to impact that number.
But by
And
legislature,
that's a 5 to 6 year.
But I think even that would at least benefit for the residents to know that it's not anything that the school board or the schools have done wrong, which is why this number is dropping. It's that, to me, it's that they didn't plan far enough ahead for this, and now we're gonna be behind, and it's gonna take a while exactly after them to get it. But at least we're not coming here and saying, why does this number keep going up? We're going to the select board saying, all right, what have you done? In 3 years, we should be at this level. In 5 years, we'll be back at this level. And hopefully they've done their job and done that thing.
yeah, and I'd say.
If I'm correct with that.
Yeah, and the potential legislative fix, which I think would be the fastest way to do this, would be to apply it to your tax bill. So when I get my tax bill, my $100,000 house, it says my fair market value is 130,000 and that's what I'm paying on. And Rhoda, who's in the same district but a different town with a different CLA, would look at her $100,000 house being $140,000 and that's what she's paying on. But we have the same tax rate at that point. That would be.
No, I agree, because then it wouldn't be pushed towards the school budget and everything too, and looked at here.
But the real estate market moves so fast these past few years, it's hard to get in front of that.
Yeah.
But I bet there's houses that are way behind. That's what, we're not looking, I think, 5 years behind, I think we're looking probably 15 and 20 years behind, so.
And it impacts people within a town differently, so if all of your high-end towns are the ones that are flipping, your CLA is dropping pretty quickly, and the person who's got, a single wide right in the village and is not gonna see that appreciation is getting hit with the CLA unfairly.
And then my only final thing was, I think, just to getting the word out that everything dropped like you showed. So when I went and voted, I mean, this was basically the last thing I had really looked at or seen, and didn't see anything in there when I went in, so I was going based off this stuff. And I don't know if it wouldn't have, I don't know what it caught it there, but just so everybody realizes that, like you said, that one chart that shows really the true value and how it's decreased over 4 years, because that's not what has been pushed out there, but it's that it's going up, we're doing. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you sharing those thoughts, and and I didn't catch your name, sorry.
Dan O'Rourke?
Great, thanks, Dan. And you bring up a lot of points that we really, as a board and along with our central office, did throughout this kind of process of our informational meetings and pushing. We have tried to kind of get this information out to the public, and to our voters, to try to kind of contend with some of the misunderstanding that pervaded this budget season, these pieces around CLA that aren't within our kind of control, these kind of intractable pieces of high school tuition and the number of kids we have to pay for. That was $1 million of that $3 million figure. The 16% increase in health insurance on top of last year's 13% increase in health insurance. Again, another piece that the board has absolutely no control over. We also try to really communicate to people that we have been very focused on our attracting high quality teachers and staff and retaining them, and what that takes to be competitive as far as our salaries. And then, the kind of core piece is creating opportunities for our kids and what it costs to do business today, in this day and age where we are subject to a lot of inflationary pressures and other pressures. So all while also trying to be really sensitive and mindful to the burden on our taxpayers. I will say though that the state does have structures and help offset property taxes for lower income people through tax sensitivity. So sometimes people forget that the increase that they might see is going to be covered by an increase in their payment from the state that helps absorb some of the hit on that tax increase. So I think these are all just some of the messages, along with this board looking really thoughtfully at what we include in the next budget. And I'm optimistic that we can present a budget and frame it in a way that voters understand what our goals are.
And I don't have anything under others, so I will yield the remaining amount of the 5 minutes that Courtney gave me on the agenda.
That was the longest 5 minutes ever.
I don't like those predictions.
All right, well, Lynn, you have 40 minutes, but maybe,
I will not take 40 minutes, I'm gonna go very fast, I promise. So now,
Okay.
flip to the slideshow, we're gonna go to action under personnel. I'm gonna ask for the board to make a motion to approve hiring of Kevin Briggs as the Bakersfield principal and Neil Agassi as the Montgomery preschool teacher.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Kat. We'll do that by roll. Lisa? Oh, sorry, right, I forgot that she's not able to talk. You wanna put a hand up, Lisa, if you're good with that? Emily? Arlene? Kat?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye.
I'm gonna ask the board to make a motion to accept the resignation of Emily Lincoln, middle school science teacher at Berkshire.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, John. By roll, Lisa? Emily?
Yes.
Kat?
Yes.
Arlene?
Yes?
Aaron?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Mary is an aye, and Lisa just responded yes as well.
Next up is a report that I put in our board monitoring plan, and this is related to elementary, go back one. I like to show we've been talking all night. There are some of our fabulous students that represent each of our 4 communities. I don't have anything under other except those lovely pictures. In district elementary school choice is something when our communities merged, we created a policy that allowed some transfer from one elementary school to another. We have a deadline of May 1st for applying for the following year. So what I have given you in your packet that you had in advance of the meeting has changed slightly. We added this year's information on here. There's 2 data points, elementary students who have left schools. The yellow reflects the first year with the policy, the red was the last school year, and the blue is this school year. And then on the right side are the number of elementary school students who have enrolled in each of those schools, again, over the course of the last 3 years. Are there any questions on that report? Okay. So we'll move on that. So I'm going to actually, I think the legislative update, the piece that Morgan and I had talked about was really something that came up in our other discussion around education funding, and hoping that these conversations can start to deepen about how we're going to solve this problem beyond this year in terms of the cost of education around the state of Vermont. So we're game to come to the table and talk about this in Montpelier, and we hope that other people are as well. Okay, next is board monitoring. This is around academic proficiency. Oops, I'm sorry, I keep jumping a whole slide ahead. The assistant principal search for Berkshire, I am going to recommend that we pause this until we meet next time and make a decision about where we're going to go with the budget discussion. So I would like to just hold on this for now, and Courtney will help you remember to put this in for next Thursday. Now the board monitoring report. This is something that I have shared with you in the past in terms of, we already talked about this a little bit earlier in the meeting. Data, we've been able to look at the individual student data, and we've been able to look at the embargo data at our level, but we haven't been able to release it until really recently. This last administration began around this time last school year, and it was fraught with some challenges and some glitches. There were several things that did not work as planned on the platform. There were kids that couldn't get on. There were accommodations that, principals are going to have to remind me. I don't know if it's that they didn't work or they didn't work. So there were several things that didn't go well in that first administration. So we're truly looking at this data as baseline, but what we are excited to see is how our kids grew from last year to this next year, because we're beginning that administration now. And based on some of the data that we've seen in terms of growth with our STAR data and other data in our local comprehensive assessment plan, we're hoping that that is a good predictive indicator that we should see growth in the cognitive assessment as well. So I took the English language arts by grade level and I pulled them out so it represents 100% of the students in each of those grade clusters rather than trying to look at the variety of numbers of students at each grade level. So that it breaks it down into the performance levels, blue being above proficiency, green being at proficiency, yellow is nearly or approaching proficiency, and red is below proficiency or significantly below. One of the principals help me. Is it significantly below? I'm trying to remember the language of red.
It's
Below.
I think it's just below.
Just below, okay. So I'm gonna go kind of fast. You can stop me if you have questions. The next slide is math. It is set up in the same way. So you can see the above, the on, the nearly, and the below. Clearly in all of these, we have tremendous growth that we're hoping to be able to make in this next year. This is science, so this is grade 5 and grade 8 science. Those are the other two grade levels that are assessed using the Cognia for that. And I did try to get some comparison data in terms of how we compare with the rest of Vermont, and that is work that we'll do between now and I'm not sure if it would be your next meeting or the one after. It was, and Morgan looked at it with me as well, it wasn't very easy to pull from it to get all of the disaggregated data because they do it by each grade level. So we will be pulling to be able to look at our disaggregated data versus their state level disaggregated data as well. Any questions on the Cognia piece? Hearing none, Mary, that is all I have for you.
Thanks, Lynn, appreciate it. So I'm very aware of the late hour, but I did want to just give our principals time to highlight or expound on their report. So I'll start with you, Rhoda.
I'm gonna keep it short and sweet. I think everything's pretty much here. I was just gonna say we had a really good family math night and it was good to see the families that were out. There was a lot more kids there this year and families there this year than the year before, which was good to see, and kids are having a good time with math, so.
Similarly,
Thanks.
sorry. Similarly, I just wanted to share, in addition to one of the things that I did not include was today, since you mentioned the championship belt, we did acknowledge, or we did name Mr. Corey, our social studies teacher, as the staff member of the month, and it was focused based on relationship building as well. Mr. Corey has been exceptional at really forming those relationships with those students, and after I gave, unfortunately, a speech that showed that we were coming back from a 7-day break, it was not directly to the point. As soon as I named him, instantly there was a huge applause, and I said, you know what? This reaction is a better explanation of why he's been named staff member of the month than anything I could have said or had to say right now.
Okay, thanks, Gavin. Sandy.
I would just like to, I meant to add this in my report and forgot to, so I sent Courtney a couple pictures. We had the building lettered. The building, we only had a sign at the bottom of the driveway forever, and now we have some identification on the building, which we're really excited about. So that was just added. And
Oh, it's huge.
yeah, it came out really nice. So we're pretty happy about that. And then I just want to put in a plug for our newest attempt at family engagement. We have a dinner/karaoke night this Friday for families, and it's not just for kids, everyone adults there too. So they're going to have a dinner for raising money for the 8th grade trip to Washington DC. That's at 6 p.m. and then karaoke is from 7 to 9. So if you're looking for a good time, come on over.
Are you leading the karaoke?
I am.
How did I guess that?
Karaoke queen.
You are.
That sounds great, sounds so fun, the sign looks awesome, Sandy.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Terry Sue is not here this evening?
I should have known, I should have said that at the beginning. She had a death in her family and she was at a service this evening, so she was not able to join.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I hope you'll send her our best wishes and condolences from all of us. So teacher appreciation, 'tis the season. When I did my pre-meet with Lynn, I know we had talked about Courtney maybe compiling a little bit of historical data to remind us of what we've done the last couple of years, which businesses we did the gift certificates from, so we can start thinking about what we might like to do for this year.
Do you want me to say what businesses we've used?
Yeah, if you could remind us of maybe the last 2 years in the towns.
Okay, so last year, the first year, 2022, that we started doing the gift certificates to restaurants, Bakersfield was West Coast Snack Bar, Berkshire was Barn Owl Bistro, Montgomery was Fire on the Mountain, and Sheldon was the Abbey. Last year, Bakersfield was Cold Hollow Catering, Berkshire was Phoenix House, Montgomery was Cafe Oma, and then we used the Abbey again for Sheldon. But it's important to note that everybody in the district could choose any one of those 4 places. It wasn't just
Right.
to the town. And if they didn't choose one, then I defaulted to what town they worked in, but they could choose any of those 4.
Is this something, Mary, that you want the whole board to tune into, or do we want to, if you're good with moving in this direction, are there maybe a board member or 2 that want to work with Courtney to pick the next round?
Yeah, I think in the past, Erin and I have been, forgive me if I'm wrong, Erin, but I think you and I were the ones that worked with Courtney on kind of figuring out the restaurants or the stores.
Yes. Yes, it has been us.
Okay, so do we want to do this as a committee, the 2 of us working with Courtney again?
I don't have any problems doing that unless there's somebody here who wants to jump in and have a voice and ideas. I'm okay.
And I'm fine doing it again too. I did have a quick question, just Lynn or principals may have a better sense of this. In general, do you get the sense from teachers that this is something they enjoy, that they're using them, they're happy to get these, or whether we should consider pivoting in a different direction?
I'll just say from Bakersfield, I think that our teachers like the idea. They struggle with it being a Bakersfield. And I know they can choose from all 4, but a lot of my teachers come from the other direction. So one of the things that they asked me is if we could include St. Albans in the distance.
Sure.
Just putting that out there.
Yeah, okay. That's helpful feedback for sure.
I guess since this is my first year, the thing I'll just say is that the way to a teacher's heart is through their stomach, so I definitely think food goes a long way in terms of showing appreciation.
Okay. Well, Erin, maybe you and I can connect and we will kind of take that under advisement. We can think about it and we can bring back something to the whole board the next time that we meet.
Sounds good.
perfect. So I think we have the biggest agenda item of them all set for our next meeting. Our regular scheduled meeting will be April 3rd, and we will be back in school rotation at Bakersfield. And then we will wait for Courtney to compile doodle data and let us know when we can have a special meeting to really dive into the budget discussion.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I still cannot get into Doodle.
No, please don't worry. No, all
We'll do
good.
it tomorrow with this other computer, should work.
Okay, perfect.
Mary, we'll do the budget.
Anything else
We'll
tonight?
we'll do the budget meeting here, right?
Yes, yeah. At central office, certainly. Okay, anything else tonight, folks? All right, thank you so much, appreciate it. I'll make a motion to adjourn. We'll do that, by all in favor, say aye.